Welcome,
to
authors,
Anonymous
with Carolyn Rosa Potts.
and A.R. Mirabal.
Today, we are talking about plot holes. And you know what? Look at my puppet. It's actually moving with my mouth. We're learning. We are evolving.
Didn't see.
That's yes. Right there. That's plot. That's character development. That's our last week's episode, in case you haven't seen it. Go and look at that.
We also don't know if this is episode 4 or 5. So let us know in the comments what episode we are on.
There are certain things you keep it between us, Carolyn. That's one of them. That's one of them.
Not knowing our episodes is kind of what a plot hole is. If you don't know your shit, it's all wobbly. So at least it's fitting.
You know what? That is actually a great segue. Because the first type of plot hole we're going to get into, we're doing the 4 R's of plot holes today. I don't know how that really works out, but we're going to call it that. The 4 R's of plot holes.
Yes.
The first leg is research plot holes. And I like to do it as a gauge, kind of like these are just your most basic ones, easiest to knock out. A research plot hole is, for example, it just happened with the movie that came out, and Chris Pratt, the Amazon Prime movie. A lot of people were saying that he was having unlimited ammo, and it's not the first movie to say that. They didn't invent the whole idea of unlimited ammo as a plot hole, but it was one that was accentuated because that movie was recent and it had a whole bunch of money behind it. So even at that level, where the writer's room had at least 15 people, they were all on their shit. I mean, they're working for Amazon. They're not just hiring people, off the box. So even in a writer's room like that, they still have the simple idea of they should probably reload after X amount of bullets being fired. Logic, right?
Yeah. So you said they're the easiest ones, but I think that makes them the most overlooked because, like you said, there's a room of writers and of 15 writers, whatever it is, and nobody picked up on it because it can be so minor. And when you're focusing, especially on making a movie or publishing a book, the bigger picture, the bigger project, you don't always think about those minor details, or you try to, or you think that you do, but that's why we have editors. People do check that stuff for you, or beta readers, things like that. So again, that's really important to make sure you have somebody checking yourself. But also thinking back of Game of Thrones, remember when they had that Starbucks cup in the shot at the table?
Great.
That's an issue. Yeah. That totally threw off the entire story. A plot hole, and that's more sloppy story writing, but for plot holes, I mean, obviously the timeline for Starbucks cup did not fit with the era that they were living in. So yeah, basic things that you can research, meaning whether it's
Starbucks.
Yeah. Oh my God. But yeah, anything where if you're writing and you come across and you're oh, I wonder this, or I don't really know about this, and you try to be oh, it's okay, I don't need to explain it, my writer's not going to pick it up. You picked it up, so your writer's going to pick it up. And even if you don't pick it up, your writer still, or your reader still might. There's actually memes that happen on Instagram that I follow, where it's hashtag I swear I'm a writer, and it's the research history of a writer's Google whatever shit they were looking up. And it's kind of important to do that no matter what it is. I saw one where it was how much ketamine can kill a horse, or how do you get away with murder? And it's things that are going to be red flags to the government, but I swear I'm a writer, and it's important to look that stuff up.
You know how they have a blacklist of people to look out for? I wonder if writers get put in a white list. Oh, no, he's a writer.
I hope. And that's the list you want to be on. You want to research everything, so there's consistency, so there's no research plot holes in your book that the government's oh, it's fine. If the government says it's fine, you're fine, and your book is good then. Yeah. And
kind of going on of the solution for that, right, is obviously just do a little research. Simple things. With the first problem that I brought up with the whole unlimited ammo thing, real simple. Whatever gun it is that your character is using, Google what the ammo capacity is, and after X amount of shots, reload. Boom. Not only that adds great tension for the plot. He has a 6-shooter revolver. He just fired 5 shots. He has one bullet to kill the big bad guy. You have a plot now. You built tension just for being a better writer. Now, not only are you a better writer for understanding that, but now the plot in itself is more coherent. There's more tension in it. And again, even though you have like all these crazy ideas and all these events that you want to happen in your writing, there always needs to be that constant pull and push, give and take, in order for people to keep wanting to turn page after page, not just chapter after chapter, you know?
Without making them stop to wonder, wait, does that make sense? And they put down the book to pick up their phone to fact check it for you. And if they do that and they find out you were right, the reader will kind of be like, oh, never mind. They know what they're doing. And then move on with the book. And it builds that trust with the reader when they're reading your work, because they know that you know what you're talking about. It's not just completely made up or doesn't make sense. Like another example, we were talking about, depending where you live, or where your character lives rather, the weather, like their environment, does it fit? Like, for instance, if I have a character in Kansas, chances are there's probably a tornado that week. There's like always tornadoes in Kansas. So you might say it's really, really windy. You wouldn't say that it's like snowing or something, because that doesn't happen in Kansas. So maybe pick a different location or pick a different weather. But it's like those minor things that will snowball more than, and they could be avoided. So yeah, that one, just like kind of slow down when you're writing, or write it all first, but then go back and check yourself, or ask someone, hey, can you read this paragraph and just let me know if it makes sense, something like that.
Check your writing before you wreck your writing. What you doing?
It's important.
That's going to be the tagline for this week. Now,
check your writing.
Check your writing before you wreck your writing. And it's going to be Ice Cube's finger going like that.
I like it. I like that. Yeah, that one's definitely important. It's the basic one. You might be like, oh, of course I'm going to look up my stuff. But yeah, you have people say something like that. Yeah, I'll do it. And then nobody does it. Yeah, make sure you actually are the one who does it. That will make your writing stand out more than you realize.
Yes, and I think Carolyn brought up a great kind of like segue into the next plot. The whole thing, the idea of like plot holes snowballing over time leads into number 2 perfectly, which is rabbit plot holes. And I'll let Carolyn take that over because she actually came up with the name. I'll give her that credit this week.
Yes, rabbit plot holes, meaning, and this is something that doesn't necessarily have to be a problem, but if you read any kind of book or watch any movie, you'll notice it actually happens all the time, where one thing happens and then it affects another. And then because of that, something else happens. And then that. So I was saying, if Jimmy never went to the store, he wouldn't have been in that robbery, which means he wouldn't have met Candace, which means Candace never would have been in that car accident with Jimmy. So it is like one thing happened and then this, and then this, and then this. So for your plot, you can have that happen, but I wouldn't make that the whole premise of your book, where it's reliant on one situation for the entire book to take hold. Because so many things happen in life. It's like a web where you can pinpoint it back to 15 different things of why something happened, and you can go stir crazy trying to pin down one point. That's more realistic and that's more life than a narrow line of tracing back the steps of it started here because of this and this happened because of that. It's like, you want to have diversity and dynamic in your book to make your plot more well-rounded and not be so reliant and dependent on just one thing happening.
And again, that's like a really good plot point. I mean, like if you're then again, I guess to play the devil's advocate, it depends on the writing, because things like that can be interesting too. I can't think of any examples right now, but I'm sure they exist, where the entire movie, the entire book, entire plot line, the entire series could have been negated if one little event had been handled differently by the characters. I think that in itself can be interesting depending on the writing, but for the most part, I have to agree with Carolyn.
But,
just because I do have to agree with her, because, and we don't always agree, people. You have to. But for this situation, she actually does really make a really good point. Even though I honestly hadn't thought about this before. But if you have that type of thing where it's just that immediate, then it's like too crazy. Like a great example is in movies that come out now, where people like forget the existence of cell phones. Like they'll use cell phones the first 15 minutes of the movie, but then the plot develops and now they somehow don't have service. That's too basic. Right. That's too easy, especially in today's like world. There's no service, dude. We have
hotspot.
I can go hop on Google Earth right now and look at fucking Kenya.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't have service. Dude, you're in America. You have service. Like, what are you talking about? That's crazy.
Yeah, but that is a good point, that like, unless it's the reason for your book, where like your entire story is based on one thing happening, and that's the point of your book, then that is vital, and you want to stick to that. So you have the clear, definitive difference. Is this rabbit plot hole important to your book because that is what the story is based on? Or is it just kind of how it happened and you need it to happen in order for the other thing to happen? I mean, you just kind of need to know which style of your writing, and that will help you in general avoid any other kind of plot holes, because you definitely obviously have to know your story. That's why outlines are important, so you can kind of map out why things are happening, and you know, if it's important for the structure of your story, or if it's just kind of messy.
And I think that again leads in perfectly into the third R, which is reality, right? And reality meaning the reality of your book. So this is different from research, because research are things that you look up that just can easily be looked up.
Yeah.
You know, your character's using 44 Magnum, I mean, whatever, Desert Eagle, whatever you want, AK-47. That's things that you can look up. If you invent a weapon, that's something that you have to sit down and actually do the logic of. Let's say
you have to be the Google for that.
Exactly. And it has to be like, it has to make like relative sense. So like every so often I'll read like the first draft of somebody's like sci-fi that somebody will send me, and they'll do something like, oh, the car went Mach 30. And you ask them why they did that. And it's like, oh, because I looked up the fastest thing on Earth and it's like Mach 12. So, you know, I just doubled that and added a couple numbers. It's like, all right, but at Mach 30, you're literally causing like atmospheric problems to the Earth. Like you're blowing a hole in the atmosphere at that fast. Like literally you're moving so fast, the air molecules around it are like getting fucked up. So like things like that, you have to sometimes reel back and like just do it again. It is, I guess, like you have to do a little research, but it's more, I think, like a logic thing.
Yeah, it's a blend.
Yeah.
I mean, and yeah, like for your reality plot hole, it's just, you know, does it make sense for your story? And me and AR were trying to think, because we both knew that we have plot holes in our stories, and I went and I fixed mine, and now I can't remember it, and I wish that I did. But
11,000 feet versus.
That was the one. Yeah, AR pointed out an issue. So in my story, people live in a
living quarters.
Well, it's living quarters, but it's enclosed by a
force field.
Force field. I don't know my words today. Yeah.
I actually wrote her book, by the way.
Oh my God. No. I just literally cannot.
I was the ghostwriter. I thought we'd just get that out now.
Such a liar. All right. Anyways, in my book that I had written, I swear. Yes, they live in a forest field, and they live in, the people live in living quarters, what they're called. They're like apartments. And I made them like 11,000 feet tall because I needed the numbers to work, because I have numerology aspects in my book. So 1 + 1 is 2, but 11 is also an angel number. So it was all these things, and I was focused on the numbers and the spiritual aspect of it and making that fit for my book. But I didn't really think of I can't even think of an 11,000 foot building. No building is that tall. And if one ever gets to be that tall, even in my made up world, like I said, they're in a force field. My force field, I didn't think my force field extended 11,000 plus feet around the entire world, pretty much around America. So it just was something like that, where in my reality for my book, so I toned back the scale of my buildings and I made them 100 feet tall. And so the numerology does get a little messed up, but to be fair, unless somebody studies and knows numerology, my reader isn't really going to pick up on that anyways. That was something just more fun for me and for me to do. But in order for it to be coherent and make sense for the book, I needed to fix and check that plot hole. And so I made it more realistic for my reality.
Now, I actually have 2 examples that I can think of, because I was going to go with the one that I told you about, but as you said that, it just reminded me of another one that came up. So my plot hole was that in my book, there's like a teleportation paths. And there's one scene in the book, I think right in the beginning, chapter 2 or chapter 1, I think, where the character is like talking about that he's like in a queue in order to, like in a line, in order to get to one of these like teleportation paths in order to like.
In case you didn't know what a queue was.
Okay. So, in order to get to the across the street, basically. And he's like talking about how, like, the irony of that, like how he's waiting in such a line just across the street. And then like somebody plotted out, it's like, all right, I understand the use of teleportation paths, but at that point, why is there not just a bridge that goes over this crazy highway that you're talking about? And I was just like, okay, that's a really good point. But then right there, so instead of restructuring the entire thing and causing one of these rabbit plot holes that we were talking about earlier, I just made it that like it was instead like a city issue. Like the city, like the bridge broke and the city hasn't fixed it. So because of that, he now has to wait in a line of XYZ just across the street. And that right there made it a little bit richer, because who hasn't had that thing where like, your job is exactly at exit 25, but they're doing construction. So now you have to go crazy and take like a whole bunch of different exits just to get to the same situation that was like 5 minutes away normally.
Let me just add too real quick in that is another thing that goes with reality, because that actually happens. Whether you're making your own world or not, you still want to have things that other people can relate to, because the people reading your book literally obviously live here on planet Earth. So you need to have something in there that the reader's going to be like, oh, I get it. I know what that's like. And it just kind of immerses them even in your like fantasy world. Even if it's not real, it has those aspects that are real. So it's kind of funny too, when you have that whole separate universe, but you still have the same kind of problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like a really great example. And then you didn't have to change the entire story. Sometimes you just need to put a little band-aid over it. And it's just enough to move the story along the way that you wanted it to. It's not that your entire writing, your entire scene is trash and it needs to be rewritten. It's just something that needs to be tweaked. And every writer is going to have this in your book. And again, like I said, that's why better readers and editors are just as important.
Better readers, for sure. So the second plot hole that I kind of went was actually kind of technology based. It made me think about when Carolyn was saying the whole thing about numbers, right? And side note, you could have just taken off a 0. Like you could have made it 110 feet. And that
I might have done that. I forget exactly what I put, or I might have just done 100 for another numerology reason, because the buildings are different sizes too. One was 11,000, another was like 980. So I did have to play around with it, but that's more detailed.
Yeah. But one thing, mine had a little similar thing. So I actually have like the posters around here, but obviously cameras. One of the technologies I made for the book was basically their version of vehicles, transportation, called, the one in particular the character has is called a T240. And I like the number 24, so that's why I went with 240, right? Again, personal thing, my reason, like what Carolyn was saying, which is like, numerology based, all those things. And then their subsequent like things after it, I made it like 330 and 420. Now 420 is just the opposite of 240, so that's why I chose that. And then 330, I just kind of like chose it because I like 33 more than 34. Like I just didn't think it made sense. So again, just personal preferences. But when I sat back and like thought of it, that's a weird progression of cards thing. So it goes from 240 to 330 to 420. Like what's the difference here? And again, instead of restructuring the entire thing and just like going back and tweaking those numbers, I made it that it's like a class difference. So like 240 might be kind of like a slimmer body, but then a 330 might be like a fatter body. Little things like that, the same way that like you'll have like a sports edition versus non-sports edition, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. Turbo versus non-turbo, like little things like that. So I just made it a tweak like that.
Yeah, it really is just, it's more so a thing of tweaking. Like I think of me definitely, and I think most writers, we hear the word plot hole, especially in our own story, and we get very scared.
I mean, yeah. No one wants a hole. Like that's crazy.
Right. Like we get upset, we get defensive, we shut down. But most of the time the plot holes, like they are these smaller ones that can be fixed. Now given sometimes they are really huge and you lay in bed like spiraling in your mind, wondering how to fix it. But you always do. And sometimes it is a matter of rewriting that scene. And if it comes to that, just know it's obviously to make your story better. So plot holes in a way can show you where to strengthen your book. So kind of look at them as a blessing, not necessarily a curse. It's good to have, like, then it makes you think about other things that you had written and check other things that you have written. And it makes you a better writer. I mean, you're not going to not write a book for the first time and not have any plot holes. I don't believe you if you said you've never had this problem. Like, it's just not true.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like almost like a philosophical thing, right? Like when you end up at that crossroad, you can't just like be like, oh shit, time to turn around. You have to like, find a new way. You got to do something. You got to think. And honestly, as Carolyn was saying that, I was thinking how much fun, like that. I actually really like that sometimes when you have to like sit back and like, while you're like with your friends smoking or just like in your, like in that like 30 seconds between the Netflix, episodes, you're thinking, it's like, man, how am I going to fix that? Mm-hmm. It's like keeping you up at night. Like I kind of live for those moments because then it really like I have to visit my world now.
Yeah.
Like it's not a thing that I can just like think about it overtly. Like I have to put myself in that thing. Like I have to really let my imagination go and put myself there. That's fun for me. I like that type of
That
stuff.
is the creative process. And actually it does lead into our next thing, which was what we coined because we wanted to keep the art theme, was reeling characters. So when we're talking about being immersed in our world and things that we would need to fix and need to make work, same goes for how your characters react to that situation. Again, go listen to our character development podcast, because then we talk about how to make a real well-rounded character and make them fit their personality, their drive, their passions, their dislikes, things like that. So for the reeling character, sometimes you need to reel your character back and make sure that they don't have any plot holes within themselves. Make sure that they are behaving the way that you want them to behave in a situation, that they don't do something completely out of character where the reader's going to feel that disconnect where it's like, wait a minute, I thought I knew the main character. I thought we were best friends. Why are they doing this? Why'd they switch up on me like that? So for the reeling characters, again, it kind of just goes back to character development and making sure that for what they do, they have a reason. It's not just to make the plot work for the scene because that's how you've written it and you don't want to go back and rewrite it. You want to make sure that it is a consistent flow.
And I think one of the most prominent examples that comes to mind when it comes to these type of reeling plot holes, as we're calling them, is the undeserved redemption arc of the bad guy, right? Well, or book one is like building up this fucking just, you know, highest level of asshole you can imagine. Like you just want this person's head on a stick so badly. And then now book two, they're friends with just because like he looked out in the sky and was like, oh man, I feel bad about this. And now that's it. Everybody just forgot about the 40 million people he just killed. I think the most recent Wonder Woman 84 had that where like for, you know, out of a 2-hour movie, 1 hour and 50 minutes of it was just like building up this animal of a person. All you wanted, like no redemption in him. Like, all, like, you know, even mean to his kid, like there's no level of love. And then last 5 minutes is just like, oh man, you know, I shouldn't have done that. And then everybody just forgets him. Let him go. No jail time. Nothing. Not even a mean tweet. Nothing.
No repercussions. Mean tweet. Nothing.
Nothing. He's still going to his job on Monday, bro. What do you mean? He's getting a promotion in a week and a half. Nothing. Yeah. That type of stuff is like those are the type of things you need to work on and make sure that you're not falling into things like that just because you want something cool to happen. I think that's the main thing when it comes to reeling plot holes, that you really have to look at it in a way from actual honest reality. Even if you're in a world, you know, that is completely made up, there's not even water on your thing, like that nothing is unique or like nothing is similar to this earth. Even then you still have to have some, like it has to make sense.
Yeah.
The character development at least.
Back to character development, definitely. And I think ways to fix that too, aside from knowing your characters. But if you really want the scene to work out the way it does, you can ask yourself certain questions like, okay, does it need to happen with this character? Can it happen to another character to which the situation fits better? Or could the situation maybe change a little bit so that my character can react the way that I want them to with the situation? So see if it's an inner thing, an outer thing, and what can be tweaked. See if you can bring in another character, or just see if you can bring in maybe tweak your character's personality a little bit. So when you have them react to a situation, you already kind of planted seeds prior that would make sense to why they reacted the way they did when presented with the situation. So I think just, really developing your characters for at least reeling them back in for the situation. That's my point on for character plot holes.
Yeah, a huge one. And again, as far as examples that I can think of, examples, I mean, it's unlimited, because like really the main thing you have to do is just always, you have to almost gauge yourself. There's a lot of times that like, especially when you get like that initial heart attack of maybe like a plot hole, or like somebody saying that like, oh, you need more like action in like a scene, you immediately want to double back and go like, all right, well, what about this? Now more fire, right? So the whole like Hollywood sequel thing where like, you know, in movie 1, 4 buildings exploded, now movie 2 has to have 16 for whatever reason. It doesn't always have to be like that. Dial back, be realistic.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Sometimes you don't always need to add in more action or power. Maybe you do need to tone back the action and have it play out in a different way. That's not just that Hollywood everything blows up type of thing, but maybe it's more emotional, or maybe it's more situational. It's not just so chaotic.
It leads into a great thing, and probably what we're going to talk about next week, which is like play around with genres, right? Even if you are writing an action movie, you know, not every single scene needs to be an action movie, and like you also don't have to go the Hollywood route of just throwing in some emotional shit just cause. But like again, be realistic. There's different things to play around with. Maybe having a couple scenes that are funny.
Yeah.
As Carolyn said, emotional things are great too. And it doesn't even have to be emotional, like, oh, I have a baby daughter and I gotta save her. Maybe it's a bromance that, like, you know, like they're like, you know, they've known each other since they were kids, and there's just like a genuine respect for one another. Those are great to see. Or even I think it's interesting when there's like platonic relationships with like just a little bit of like the kind of like the Office situation, Pam and Jim. Like those are great too. Play around with it.
Think about all the emotions that we have as humans, not like just the happy and the sad and the angry, but maybe it's regret. Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe it's confusion, like anything, any of those thousands of emotions that we feel, your characters can feel them too. And they should play out your scenes accordingly. So if your character is naturally an angry person and something really happy in the scene happens and you want them to just explode with joy because they're so angry and it's their triumphant moment to be happy, unless you have other things that hint at them wanting to seek happiness prior in the book, why would they burst with joy at a really happy thing? You'd think most people would, but if that's not your character, maybe they start to question why a good thing is happening to them. Maybe they come at it with like, well, wait a minute, and like start to get worried about it. It's like not necessarily anger, and it doesn't have to be the opposite, which is happy, but it's like that in between type of reaction, that in between kind of emotion. So those are kind of things to consider with your character.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's like, you know, kind of like last point on this. Well, my point anyway, if Carolyn wants to throw in anything in there, but it's how you play around with like really complex emotions that makes it writing not only fun, but fun to read, right? A situation like that is great. So let's say that like a great situation happens and every person around the character, your main character, your protagonist, whoever, is like happy, and this person is actually angry at being happy. That's interesting. Like the anger actually carries over into even other emotions, that now they're angry because they're feeling this emotion. It's like, wait, why are you making me feel this way? I should be in control of my emotions. Why are you bringing this to me?
Yeah.
And that's great. And those are the type of things that, you know, I've always said that like it's the dyad of people that make people. It's not just the good, it's not just the bad. You have to look at everything as like one full piece. And when you make characters like that, again, going back to the whole character development thing, you have to make sure that you're staying true with that, and with the whole plot development, plot whole thing we're talking about now, is you have to make sure that it's consistent. You didn't just do a great job the first time and now you write. You have to make it consistent.
Yeah. So to make it consistent, just to recap with our R's, research, because those are the things that can easily be looked up and easily get overlooked. So research, rabbit plot holes, know your story angle and the reason why your plot happened. Is it because one singular thing and then this and this? Or is it this one thing happened, but it also could be a little bit of this, and then this person reacted? And so just, is it a blend? Is it linear, and why? And then the reeling characters, making your characters stick to themselves and play with different kinds of emotions. Maybe you change the character, maybe you add more to the scene, maybe you take back from the scene, so you reel it back in. And then the reality, I switched the last two, but then your reality plot holes, your world building, and your Google, not things that you can necessarily research, maybe to an extent, but really that you know it makes sense for your world, and other people would agree that read your book that this is within the realm and the science of your atmosphere and your world.
Definitely. And those are the 4 R's. If you stick to them, I can't really tell you what's going to happen. I mean, that's just my opinion. You know what I'm saying?
It'll help. It'll help. I don't know if it'll make it perfect, but it'll help.
It helped me. It's the better way. That's a disclaimer. If you try to sue me, it's not going to work. Why?
We're not doing
I'm
that.
Just hoping it. Please don't sue me. I don't want to go through that. And that is the end of the podcast. Authors Anonymous. We are getting better with the release dates, people. I promise you.
Yes.
Last week our first week, we finally got it on time, and I promise we're gonna be doing that consistently. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of cool things are coming. Honestly, I have a lot of cool ideas to keep on making the podcast. I promise you, little skits with the sock puppets are coming soon.
Oh, I'm excited for that one. Yes,
they're coming
but
soon.
Until then,
peace out.
Bye.
This is Authors Anonymous. Check with us next Tuesday. Bye.